Have you ever felt lost when comparing your life to that of great historical figures? People like Carl Jung, Albert Einstein, and Nelson Mandela left an undeniable impact on the world, and we often ask ourselves, does my life also have such a significant purpose? This kind of thinking can lead to frustration and the feeling that we are merely going through life without leaving a mark. But what if the true meaning of life was not in grand achievements, but in the way we deal with our own internal battles? Carl Jung, one of the greatest names in psychology, teaches us that life's purpose is not something external. It is not a goal to be achieved or a status to be conquered. On the contrary, it is rooted in who we truly are, in the deepest layers of our being. According to Jung, understanding oneself is the first step in finding a genuine purpose. And this understanding only happens when we are willing to look inward and confront what we avoid, our dark side. Our personal development is often associated with perfecting our strengths, but Jung argued that we cannot truly grow without first recognizing and integrating the hidden aspects of our personality. This shadow side that we avoid, our fears, insecurities, and repressed impulses, contains valuable clues about who we really are and what our true purpose is. The problem is that society teaches us to hide and deny these parts of ourselves. From an early age, we learn that we must always be productive, kind, and controlled. Any trait that deviates from this socially accepted ideal is quickly suppressed. Thus, we create an edited version of ourselves, a social self that fits others' expectations. But does this limited version truly reflect who we are? Or, by rejecting essential parts of our personality, are we actually distancing ourselves from our own essence and, consequently, from our purpose? Jung used to say, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This means that as long as we seek answers in the external world, whether through success, recognition, or comparison with others, we will continue to feel incomplete. The real journey begins when we have the courage to face our own hearts, our fears, and everything we have been taught to suppress. Throughout this video, we will explore how Carl Jung's psychology can help us find meaning and purpose in life, not by ignoring our shadows, but by learning to integrate them. We will understand what it really means to work on this hidden side and how doing so can make us more authentic and fulfilled. If we want to discover the purpose of our lives, we need to go beyond what is visible, beyond what we consciously know about ourselves. For Carl Jung, the human mind is like a vast ocean. What we see on the surface represents only a small part of who we really are. The greater part of our identity is submerged, hidden in the unconscious. And it is precisely there that one of the most important keys to our fulfillment resides, the shadow. The shadow, according to Jung, represents everything we repress or deny within ourselves. These are characteristics, desires, and impulses that, for some reason, we consider inappropriate or incompatible with the image we want to project to the world. At some point in your life, you may have learned that feeling anger was unacceptable, that showing sadness was a sign of weakness, or that questioning certain rules was wrong. So, to be accepted, you buried those feelings deep in your unconscious. But just because we have ignored these emotions does not mean they have disappeared. On the contrary, they continue to exist and silently influence our behavior, often without us realizing it. The shadow can manifest in various ways. Sometimes it appears as exaggerated reactions to certain situations. Have you ever noticed how some attitudes in others deeply irritate you? What bothers us most about other people is often a reflection of something we deny within ourselves. This phenomenon is called psychological projection. What we repress internally tends to manifest externally, leading us to judge and criticize others for traits that, in reality, are part of us. Therefore, whenever something or someone triggers an intense emotional reaction in you, it may be a sign that your shadow is trying to emerge. Another way the shadow manifests is through a sense of emptiness and lack of purpose. When we deny important parts of ourselves, we live a fragmented existence. We identify only with our persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by society, and ignore everything that does not fit into this superficial identity. But the more we distance ourselves from the totality of our being, the more we feel that something is missing. And this is exactly what leads us to seek purpose outside of ourselves when, in fact, It has always been within us. If we want to find our true path, we need to integrate our shadow, not as something to be fought against, but as a legitimate part of who we are. Instead of seeing these aspects as flaws, we should view them as essential pieces of a larger puzzle. The process of self-knowledge does not mean only recognizing our strengths, but also understanding and accepting our imperfections. Now that we understand that our shadow contains repressed aspects of our personality, and that ignoring it can distance us from our true purpose, an essential question arises. How can we integrate this hidden side and use it to our advantage? Carl Jung called this process shadow work, a path of self-knowledge that allows us to reclaim important parts of ourselves and, in doing so, live a more authentic and meaningful life. But before we discuss how to do this, we need to understand something essential. Knowing your shadow does not mean becoming a slave to it. Many people think that accepting their dark side means giving in to negative impulses or justifying destructive behavior. But this is not true. Working with the shadow does not mean blindly identifying with it. Rather, it involves recognizing its existence and learning how to deal with its effects. After all, what we deny has power over us, but what we accept can be transformed. So, how can we begin this inner work? Here are some essential steps. 1. Become an observer of yourself. The first step in integrating the shadow is to increase self-awareness. This means paying attention to your emotions, reactions, and behavior patterns without immediately judging them. For example, start asking yourself, why did I react this way? Does this feeling seem authentic, or is it just a mask I created to be accepted? What does this emotion say about me? One of the most effective ways to do this is through reflective writing. Keeping a journal where you record your emotions and reactions can help you identify patterns that previously went unnoticed. Another useful method is meditation, as it allows you to observe your thoughts without getting attached to them. 2. Identify emotional triggers. The shadow often reveals itself in moments of strong emotion, especially when we feel anger, envy, or fear. Whenever something or someone provokes an intense reaction in you, pause and ask yourself, what exactly in this situation bothered me so much? Could this reflect something I deny or avoid seeing in myself? Many times, what we criticize in others says more about us than about them. Jung explained this phenomenon through the concept of projection, where our own repressed traits are seen as flaws in other people. For example, someone who harshly judges others for being selfish may actually be repressing their own desires and always putting others' needs above their own. Instead of balancing this characteristic, they reject it entirely, which is why they feel anger when they see it in someone else. 3. Find usefulness in the shadow. Not everything in your shadow is necessarily bad. In many cases, repressed characteristics can become valuable resources when properly used. Anger, for example, can be destructive when suppressed for too long and then explodes uncontrollably. But when used correctly, it can be a powerful force for setting healthy boundaries and standing up against injustice. Envy, instead of being just a negative feeling, can be an indicator of hidden desires and ambitions. If you feel envious of someone who has achieved something you desire, it may be a sign that it's time to pursue your own dreams. Laziness, when viewed from another perspective, might indicate that you are exhausted and need rest to recover mentally. Instead of fighting against these emotions, start asking yourself, how can I channel this energy in a constructive way? 4. Create a safe space to explore your shadow. Integrating your shadow is a deep process, which is why it's essential to create an environment where you can explore it without fear or guilt. This space can be an individual practice, such as therapy, reflective writing, or meditation, but it can also involve conversations with trusted people who are open to discussing these topics without judgment. For Jung, one of the greatest mistakes of modern society is the repression of the shadow. We live in a world where everyone tries to project an image of perfection, which causes many to disconnect from their true essence. But those who have the courage to face their dark side become more authentic, balanced, and clear about their purpose. The shadow is not your enemy. It is a gateway to a deeper understanding of who you truly are. The purpose of your life cannot be discovered only by looking at your visible qualities. It is also hidden in the parts of you that have been ignored and repressed over time. Recognizing the shadow is an essential step toward self-understanding, but this process cannot stop at mere intellectual awareness. For this knowledge to have a real impact on life, it must be transformed into action. Many people get lost at this stage because they think that reflecting on their shadows is enough to change their lives. However, Jung believed that true transformation occurs when we translate this inner knowledge into concrete actions in the world. The problem is that most people live reactively. They wait for life to happen, for opportunities to arise on their own, for change to occur without having to take risks. This behavior is a reflection of the fear we carry within us. By living reactively, we avoid making difficult decisions, avoid confronting challenges, and avoid putting ourselves in situations that might make us uncomfortable. And often, this fear does not stem only from uncertainty about the future, but from something deeper, the fear of discovering what we are truly capable of. When someone spends years repressing certain traits of their personality, they may come to believe that those aspects simply no longer exist. But when we start bringing the shadow into consciousness, we realize that we have always carried within us strengths that were left behind out of fear of judgment or failure. When we ignore our ambition, we convince ourselves that we would never be capable of achieving something significant. When we suppress our anger, we believe that we will never be strong enough to assert ourselves. When we deny our creativity, we end up believing that we are just ordinary people with nothing special about us. But what if all of this was wrong? The only way to discover who we truly are and what our real purpose is by taking action. It is not enough to reflect on your shadows, understand your hidden fears and desires, and then continue living the same way. You must transform this awareness into choices, test possibilities, and experiment with new paths. Every time we avoid taking action, we reinforce a cycle of paralysis that prevents us from growing. But when we take the first step into the unknown, we create a new narrative for ourselves. Jung used to say, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." This means that the purpose of your life cannot be found only in thoughts, but in your daily actions. Every choice we make shapes who we are. If you desire a more meaningful life, you need to take actions aligned with what you truly believe and want, even if it means facing your own fears. Many people wait to feel confident before acting, but this is a major trap. Confidence does not appear before action. It is built along the way. Fear and insecurity will always be present at the beginning of any journey, but if we let these emotions dominate us, we will never move forward. The key is to act despite fear, to understand that it is part of the process, and that we only overcome our limitations when we allow ourselves to face them directly. The shadow is not an obstacle to be eliminated, but a guide for our development. Everything we have repressed throughout life can become a source of strength, if we learn to channel this energy correctly. What was once a blockage can become a powerful tool for building a more authentic life. When we recognize and utilize all parts of ourselves, we become more complete, more aligned with our essence, and consequently, closer to discovering our true purpose. If there is one thing that prevents most people from living authentically and in alignment with their true purpose, it is fear. Fear of rejection, failure, judgment, and uncertainty. But Carl Jung teaches us that fear should not be avoided. It should be understood. He believed that what we fear the most often holds the most important answers about ourselves. Where your fear lies, there too lies your next task. This means that instead of running away from situations that scare us, we should see them as a call for growth. Fear is not our enemy. It is a tool of the unconscious that alerts us to challenges that need to be overcome. When we feel afraid of expressing ourselves, for example, it may indicate that there is something inside us that needs to be voiced. When we fear change, it may be because we have become accustomed to a way of living that no longer makes sense, yet we resist accepting it. Many times what we avoid is exactly what we need to face in order to move forward. But how do we deal with fear without allowing it to paralyze us? First, we need to differentiate between real fear and projected fear. Real fear protects us from concrete and imminent dangers, such as crossing a busy street without looking both ways. But projected fear is the one that comes from our mind, from the anticipation of negative scenarios that haven't even happened yet. This type of fear is what most holds us back. We create stories about everything that could go wrong, about how people will judge us, about how we might fail and regret it. These stories are often exaggerated and unlikely, yet we convince ourselves they are real. Jung believed that fear grows stronger when it is repressed. In other words, the more we try to ignore it, the more it expands within us. Therefore, the only way to overcome fear is to face it directly. This does not mean acting impulsively without planning, but rather investigating the root of that fear and preparing to confront it consciously. If you fear failure, ask yourself, what would really happen if I failed? Is the worst-case scenario truly as bad as I imagine? And if I could learn something valuable from that failure? Another way to reduce fear's power over us is through experimentation. Instead of seeing your actions as definitive decisions, try approaching them as small tests. By taking small steps toward what you fear, you will realize that fear tends to diminish over time. The unknown is frightening because we lack experience with it, but as we get closer, it becomes more familiar and less threatening. Fear never completely disappears because there will always be something new to challenge us. But when we learn to see it as part of the process and not as a sign to retreat, it transforms into fuel for growth. People who stop acting out of fear remain trapped in a stagnant life, while those who face their fears discover potential they never imagined they had. But even when we confront our fears, things don't always go as planned. Life is full of ups and downs, victories and defeats, and that is precisely why accepting imperfection is an essential factor in finding meaning and purpose. Even when we become aware of our shadow, start taking action and face our fears, life still remains full of challenges. Many people believe that once they find their purpose, everything will become easier, that they will finally reach a life free of difficulties. But the truth is that life's meaning is not found in the absence of problems, but in how we choose to deal with them. Carl Jung understood that human existence is a constant dance between light and darkness, victories and failures, moments of clarity and periods of doubt. There is no permanent state of fulfillment, and it is precisely this oscillation that makes the journey meaningful. The mistake is not in falling, but in refusing to learn from the falls. Life gains meaning not because everything goes right, but because, despite adversity, we keep moving forward and continue to transform ourselves. Many of the most influential people in history were not those who had easy lives, but those who faced great challenges and refused to give up. They learned that every obstacle can be a teacher, that every disappointment can bring a new perspective, and that every failure can be a bridge to something greater. When we look at our own journey through this lens, we realize that even the most difficult moments have played a fundamental role in shaping who we are. Jung once said, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness." True fulfillment comes when we accept that life is not a straight path of constant success and happiness, but rather a cycle of highs and lows, where each experience contributes to our growth. That is why finding purpose does not mean reaching a final destination. It means continuing to evolve, learn, and discover new layers of oneself along the journey. The purpose of your life is not to become someone perfect, without flaws or weaknesses. It lies in your ability to embrace all parts of yourself, including those you once tried to hide. It lies in the courage to act even when fear tries to paralyze you. It lies in the willingness to turn difficulties into lessons and to use your shadow as an ally rather than an enemy. What truly makes life meaningful is not titles, achievements, or external recognition. What gives life meaning is the way you choose to live it, the authenticity with which you express yourself, the depth with which you allow yourself to feel, and the courage with which you face your own journey. And in the end, it doesn't matter how far you have come or how many things you have achieved. What really matters is that you have lived as your true self, without fear of embracing your wholeness. Because, as Jung teaches us, the true awakening happens when we stop looking outward for meaning and start looking inward. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This helps us continue bringing content like this and reach more people who need to hear this message. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.